Hi everybody, this is Bonnie Barker with Bonnie Bay Crochet, and today I want to show you how to make my Celtic braided sweater. This is another versatile design. You can make this as a long sleeve sweater. I also have an option for you. You can make this as a summer top and just omit the sleeves, and you can choose a more breathable natural fiber for this summer that I think you will really enjoy. Well, let me go ahead and show you what you're going to need. For this project, I'm going to be using hand-dyed yarn from Nitty Gritty Fiber Arts, and I'll have information on this in the video description. Each of these hanks of yarn has 100 grams, 437 yards, or 400 meters, and it is made up of 75% superwashed merino wool and 25% recycled nylon. The number of hanks that I will be using for the size large will be written just across the bottom of your screen, and I encourage you to check the written pattern, which will also be available. Check the video links below, and you can find all the information you need as to the sizing specifics of the other various sizes. I'm also recommending that you have a size G or 6 or 4.00 millimeter crochet hook and a yarn needle and a pair of sharp scissors handy. To begin, for the large size, I'm going to start with a slip knot, and I'm going to use a starting chain of 102 chains. After completing your starting chain of 102 chains, we want to join to the first chain, and I want you to be very careful to be sure that we don't twist the chain before we join. So I'm going to be very careful here. Okay, so I'm going to join right there. There we go. And we're going to join with a slip stitch to that starting chain. After we do that, I'm going to chain 2, and for the record, the chain 2 does not count as a stitch in the stitch count. And we're going to work a double crochet in each chain. I'm just working in the side of the chain, because I am going to work on the remainder part of the chain when we do the finishing off later on. So you don't need to worry about working in the back bump unless that is your preference. So we're just going to work a double crochet in each chain all the way around, and you should have 102 double crochets once you finish this round. At the end of row 1, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. Go ahead, chain 2. We're going to turn, and again you should have 102 double crochets in that round. I've decided to switch to my black backdrop because I do believe that the contrast is better, not as harsh, and I think you'll be able to see the stitches better. And you get to see the beautiful quality of this yarn. Alright, so now for round 2, I've turned, I've chained 2. This is where we begin the braided cable. I'm going to skip the first 2 stitches. Again, just as a reminder, this chain 2 does not count as a stitch. After skipping those 2 stitches, we're going to work front post treble crochets in each of the next 2 stitches. Working in front of these last 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble in each of the 2 stitches that we just skipped, starting with the first stitch that was skipped, and then the next one that was right next to it. Okay, after that, we are going to front post treble in the very next 2. Just keep in mind, do not skip any stitches for the 4th and actually the 5th and 6th, the last 2 stitches of this 6 stitch motif. Okay, So now we're going to do something interesting. We're going to work in between the last stitch and the next stitch. And what we're going to do is we're going to work 3 double crochets. Okay, just like that. That's going to increase our stitch count by about 33%. All right, so now we're going to repeat that all the way around. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post treble crochet in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches. We're going to front post treble crochet in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And then we front post treble crochet in the next 2 available stitches. And after we do that, don't forget 3 double crochets worked in between the last stitch and the next stitch. This is not worked directly into a stitch, it's in between those 2 stitches. So we work 3 double crochets. So let's pause and take a look. And this is what you're going to work all the way around. After you've worked that last braid, we're going to work 3 double crochets in between that last stitch and the next stitch. And we're going to join with a slip stitch to the very first stitch of the round. Go ahead and turn. And we are going to chain 2 to start round number 3. In each of the double crochets, we're going to work 2 double crochets, just worked right into the top loops. So those 3 double crochets, I'll go ahead and finish this here. Those 3 double crochets become 6 double crochets in between the braided cables. After working those 6 double crochets, we're going to be working over the braided cable. And the first thing we're going to do is skip the first 2 stitches, and we're going to work back post trebles over the next 2 stitches. Working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side, we're going to back post treble into this stitch and then into this stitch. So coming in from the back, there we go, and then it's going to cross on the front side, which is currently the back side. So again, we come in, this is from the back side, and we complete that back post treble. And then we work the next 2 stitches, which are right here, working back post treble crochets over these 2 stitches. So the braided cable is just a 2 row or round, in this case, repeat. We've done the first round, and then we just completed the second round as far as working the braided cable. I'll show this to you again. So now we come to the 3 double crochets. We're just going to again work 2 double crochets in each of these stitches. Just like that. So we make sure that we have 6 stitches, and then again working over the braided cable. We're going to skip the first 2 stitches, back post trebles over the next 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side. We're going to go ahead and back post treble in each of these. I'm trying to flip it up so that you can see the front side so that you understand which stitch that we're actually picking up. And then the last 2 stitches, which are right here. And so after this round, your stitch count will actually double from 102 stitches to 204. So go ahead and work this all the way around. And again, the 102 was the round 1, and then this is round 3, which will double to 204 stitches. So go ahead and work that all the way around. At the end of this round, we join with a slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. Just like that. Let's go ahead and turn. And this is what you should have after 3 rounds. Now for round number 4, we are going to work a chain 2. So after that chain 2, we're going to be working the braided cable over each braided cable, and we're going to begin a new braided cable over these 6 stitches in between. I'll go ahead and do the first 2 for you. Skip the first 2 stitches, front post treble over the next 2 stitches, working in front of those 2 stitches, front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped, and hopefully this will be easier to see how this is progressing. And then we do front post trebles over the 2 stitches right down here. Let's try that one again, since it got away from me. All right, and then we're going to start a new braid over these 6 stitches. Skip 2 stitches, front post treble in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those 2 stitches, front post treble and the 2 stitches. Let me try that one again. There we go. And the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And then front post treble in the next 2 stitches. Just like that. So go ahead and work that all the way around, again working braid over these 6 stitches, and then begin a new braid over the next 6 stitches. At the end of round 4, we join with a slip stitch to the very first stitch of the round, and make sure that you join it to the top of that first front post treble and not the chain. Okay, so this is what we have after 4 rounds, and you can see the braids begun. This will develop even more after the next round or 2. So we're going to go ahead and turn. And to start round 5, we're going to chain 2, and we're simply going to work the braided cable all the way around. So we're going to skip 2 stitches, back post treble in the next 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side. We're going to back post treble in the 2 stitches that we just skipped, assuming we can hang on to the loops. Let's try that one again. And then in the next stitch as well. And then we back post treble into the next 2 stitches, and they're hiding here, so you need to make sure that you find these. And that's what we're going to do all the way around. And I'll go ahead and start on the next one. Again, skip 2 stitches, back post treble in the next 2 stitches, and then working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side. You see the 2 stitches there. We're going to work in. and the second one, and then back post treble in the next 2 stitches. And we're just going to work this all the way around. You should have a total of 34 braids at this point. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this is developing. So go ahead and work that all the way around. At the end of row 5, join with a slip stitch to the very first stitch of the round. Let's go ahead and turn and see what we have. So this is how your collar should be developing. Now for the next several rows, you can go ahead and look across the bottom of the screen for how many rows we're going to repeat the last 2 rows, or repeat rows 4 and 5 to establish the pattern stitch of the braided cable. So we're going to do this for the remainder of the yoke of the sweater. This is what you should have after completing 16 rows. Now for row 17, we are going to chain 2, and I'm going to turn. I'm going to have the back side facing us, and we are going to work the row to discontinue the braided cable, and we do that simply by working back post double crochets in each stitch all the way around. We're not crossing back and forth like we've been doing. We're just going to work them straight across. Make sure that you work 6 back post double crochets over every braided cable. So I'm going to work 6 of these for you and just show you how this looks. Okay, so you're just going straight across with those back post double crochets. So go ahead and work that all the way around. At the end of this round, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that first stitch of the round, and I'm going to go ahead and just put a little chain to hold this in place, because now I have an assignment for you to go ahead and get those 4 stitch markers. And let me show you what I have done. This again is for the large size. Now this is the join. Okay, and let's go ahead and turn. I'm going to turn this way because we are going to work with the front side facing this next round. Now we're looking at the back of the yoke. Well, let me go ahead and show you the front of the yoke. Okay, this is what we have, and I think this is going to be a lovely sweater. I have added stitch markers, as you can see, and this is going to define where the front is. I've defined the front, and I'm going to be specific here. I've defined the back and also where the stitch markers are, or where we're going to work chains under here that are going to eventually be the armholes that we'll be working around and around on for the sleeves. Okay, so let me show you with the front side facing, and this is the seam, which will be right down the middle of the back. And what I want you to do is, counting these braided cables, count 1, 2, 3, 4 braided cables, and place a stitch marker between the cables. Go to the other side and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and place another stitch marker. So technically the seam, which is barely visible, is not going to be directly in the center and the back. It's not something we want to feature in this design, but it'll be just close to the back. Okay, so after you place those stitch markers, again from the center back, you have 4 cables over, and the other is going to be 5 cables over. Just do that. And for the right sleeve, or for the right arm, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of cables. Put another stitch marker. Again, we're still looking at the back, and we're going to do that on the other side. From the other stitch marker, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of cables, and put another stitch marker. in the front, and I've actually used another special little stitch marker just to remind me that this is the front, just in case, but you still have the seam in the back to remind you that that is the back. So let me just be real clear. In the front, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cables. Okay. So again, this is for the large size. If you want to look for the other sizes, please consult the written pattern for more detailed information. And I will have a diagram showing what to do here, because this is probably the most important thing. And once we work a couple of these rounds, I want you to be sure to have a shirt handy that fits you well, so that you can compare the measurements from this to the shirt that fits you well, just so that you know that this is going to fit before you progress too much. Okay, so now we're ready to begin the bodice section. We're going to chain 1, and working in the very first double crochet, we're going to begin what we call the wattle stitch. We're going to work a single crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet in that first stitch. We're going to skip the next stitch. In the next stitch, we're going to work again, single crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and again skip 1 stitch only. In the next stitch, single crochet, chain 1, double crochet, which is the wattle stitch. So go ahead and work that. Now again, I want to emphasize we're just skipping 1 stitch right now. Okay, oftentimes I will have you skip 2 stitches, but with this particular design we're just going to skip 1. So go ahead and work that until you get to your first stitch marker. After working those first 15 wattle stitches, you come to the first stitch marker that tells you that we're going to do something different. And again, this is where the armhole is going to be. So what we're going to do now is we're going to crochet a chain of 30 chains. After completing those 30 chains, we're going to skip the next 7 cables to the next stitch marker, which is right here, marking the beginning of the front side of the sweater. And we're going to rejoin in that first stitch of that first cable, which is on the other side of this stitch marker. And we're going to continue the wattle stitches, single crochet, chain 1, double crochet, skip 1 stitch, and then work in that next stitch all the way across the front. I'll go ahead and give you a view. So you should have the arm opening just like this on the sweater. After working those 33 wattle stitches across the front, you're going to have 1 stitch left, but we're not going to work in that stitch. Instead, we're going to go ahead and chain 30 again for the next armhole. After chaining 30 again, and again we're attached over here, we're going to skip the next 7 braids, and we're going to join to the other side of this stitch marker in the first stitch of the braid across the back. So we'll go ahead and join with the slip stitch, chain 1, and a double crochet in that stitch, and continue to skip 1 stitch and then work those wattle stitches until you get to the very first wattle stitch of the round. So having worked from that last stitch marker to the center, you should have only had to work 12 sets of wattle stitches. And so now we're going to join with a slip stitch to the chain 1 space right there and make that slip stitch, and then we're going to turn to have the back side facing us. Go ahead and chain 2 at the beginning of this round, and we're going to work only in the chain 1 space of each wattle stitch as we continue to work these wattle stitches, and work them by working a single crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and then again to the next chain 1 space only. We do that again.
So go ahead and work this, working it only in the chain one spaces. Work that until you get to the chain that will be part of the underarm. Now after working in those wattle stitches, and when you get to the chains, we are going to do this a little bit differently than we did on the foundation round. Okay, we're going to work in that next chain. Okay, we're going to work a single crochet, chain one, and a double crochet. We're going to skip the next two chains, 1, 2, and we're going to work in the next chain. So just be aware we are skipping 2 chains, not 1, as you work across the underarm. This is that chain 30, and you should have about 10 wattle stitches worked along this, or actually exactly 10 if you're making the large size. So just go ahead and work them along that chain like that. So after working those stitches, we're going to skip the last 2 chains, and that brings us back to working in those chain 1 spaces of the wattle stitches. So go ahead and complete this round. At the end of this round, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first, or actually to the chain 2 of that round. Let's go ahead and give it a chain 2, and we're going to turn, and this would be actually a good time to pause and take a look at what we have so far. Okay, we can see the texture, how this is going to look against the braided cable, and I think it's a really nice complementary texture to this sweater. Now what I'm going to really encourage you to do heavily is to compare the size of the sweater. I'm particularly concerned about the width of the sweater from armhole to armhole, and I really think you need to either try this top on, try the yoke on to make sure that this will fit you, or compare it to a sweater or shirt that fits you very well so that you can gauge the sizing. Okay, because what we're going to do from this point on is we're just going to continue working the wattle stitch rounds just again and again and again. We're just going to be working in wattle stitches from the 3rd round onward, and I want you to do that until the top is as long as you want it to be, minus 1 inch or so at the bottom, where we're going to work some ribbing to finish this project off. Okay, so again, just continue working this in the round. Make sure that you turn at the end of each round. I'll tell you how many rounds I actually work for my size, but really what matters most is the length that you desire. That's more important than the actual number of rounds. So go ahead and continue that, and I'll show you what I have once I get to the length that I am shooting for. Okay, once I've determined that I have the length that I need, and I'll show that to you in just a second, I'm going to join with a slip stitch to that first chain 2 of the round. I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 just for a second because I'm going to show you where I am. Again, this is the back side. And if I measure from the very starting chain all the way to the last round, all the way to this last round, I am measuring approximately 19 inches, and that's going to be enough for what I need for the large size. So I'm going to go ahead and chain again. So we're going to chain 2. I'm going to turn, and this is the round where we work the ribbing. Now to set this up, we're going to work 2 double crochets in that chain 1 space, and then 1 in the single crochet. We're going to work that all the way around. 2 double crochets in the chain 1 space, and then 1 in the single crochet. Notice we're not working in the double crochet. So go ahead and work that all the way around. At the end of the round, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first stitch, just like that. You don't need to turn for the remaining 4 rounds, and they're all going to be worked the same way. Chain 2, and as we work the ribbing, we're going to work a front post double crochet, followed by a back post double crochet. And we're going to work that all the way around. Front post, and back post, double crochet. At the end of each round, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. Remember now, the chain does not count as a stitch. And then we'll just continue the front post, back post, all the way around. So for the next 4 rounds, so for the ending ribbing, this will be for rounds 2 through 5. After the end of round 5, you can just fasten off and hide the loose end. Now, if you wanted to just stop at a summer sweater, you are good to go at this point. I did not work any additional rounds on this. I don't really think it needs it. But now if you wanted to add the ribbing around the neck for the summer version, you can certainly do that. You're just going to need to forward towards the end of this video when I'm working on the sleeves, the long sleeves, and I have that towards the end. And I'll put a little time mark right there across the bottom so that you can forward to that section. But let's go ahead right now and talk about adding sleeves. This is going to be far easier than you think. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add our yarn. We're going to work a slip knot here. And I like to add these to the bottom or to the underarm section right here, because there is going to be a slight seam, which is not going to be bad at all, but I do like to have that rather hidden below, so it just makes it less prominent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join. Let me go ahead and do this again. All right, I'm going to join. I'm going to join right here. This is the section where we work the wattle stitch and then skip to etc. many rounds ago. So I'm going to go ahead and join with the chain. I'm going to pull that down just a little bit, and I'm going to work a wattle stitch in this stitch here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how I'm going to add the stitches. Now, it's not going to be exactly stitch by stitch, okay? For this size, this is a large size, I'm going to be working 31 wattle stitches evenly around the entire opening, and I'll go ahead and work that with you and show you how I'm going to do that. So the way I'm going to do this is I have, as you can see, just worked the first wattle stitch. I'm going to skip the chain 2 space, and then I'm going to work in the next space, which is where the other wattle stitch opposite of this was worked. This is when working the underarm. And so I'm going to do that in this section. Again, skip the chain 2 and working in the place opposite that wattle stitch. And I'm going to work it in this manner as I'm working on that foundation chain. I just have a few of these. I'll go ahead and work these, and then I'll show you the transition. I'm also going to do one more thing just to keep things clear. I'm going to put a stitch marker, a removable stitch marker, in that very first wattle stitch of the round. Okay, now as we get to the braided cable section of the sleeve cap, in general, I am going to be skipping 2 stitches, working a wattle stitch in that next stitch, and then again skipping 2 stitches and working a wattle stitch. However, I'm still not going to get the number of stitches that I need. I'm going to be short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work these in as I go along. So there are many different ways you can do this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just skip 1 stitch occasionally so that I can work this in nice and evenly. So in other words, I just want you to work these in and around just as evenly as you can. There's no right or wrong here as long as the stitches are looking even as you go around. Okay, so you may even want to spread out the wattle stitches where you only skip one stitch instead of skipping two. You know, spread that out evenly among or around the sleeve cap as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this round, and then I'll show you what I have. Okay, I got 31 of these wattle stitches worked evenly around the armhole. Full disclosure, it did take me a few tries to get these evenly spaced around this section, but it is time that is worth your while. So go ahead and establish that count. Again, if you're making the large size, if you're making a different size, definitely check the pattern. Okay, so now we're going to join with a slip stitch to that first stitch of the round, just like this. The joinings going forward will be into the chain 2 sections. Okay, now we're going to chain 2. We are going to turn. This is very important that you turn at the end of each of these wattle stitch rounds because it really looks so much better, and the stitch is designed to be turned at the end of each round. It'll look really, really nice. Okay, so now for round number 2, we're just going to be working in the chain 1 space created by the wattle stitches, and we're going to work the wattle stitch all the way around. Again, just working in that chain 1 space. So go ahead and work round 2 of the sleeve. At the end of round 2 of the sleeve, we're going to join with a slip stitch to that chain 2, and then we will turn and we're going to do additional rounds. Now, I'm not going to give you a number for how many rounds to do next because it's going to be based more on measuring with your measuring tape. So what I'm going to have you do is repeat round 2 until the sleeve is approximately 6 inches long. This again is for the large. If you want the sleeve to be longer or shorter at this point, you can go further. But after 6 inches, we're going to begin decreased rounds, and that will make the sleeve narrower as we go. So go ahead and work this, working over the same number of wattle stitches until this piece measures approximately 6 inches long. And I'd go ahead and encourage you to go ahead and put a stitch marker or something at the beginning of that first wattle stitch of each round, just so that you don't get lost in all of these stitches. So go ahead and work those 6 inches, and then I'll show you what to do next. This is how your sleeve should look after completing approximately 6 inches. For the record, I worked 22 rounds, but it's okay if the number of rounds that you worked is more or fewer. Again, what's the most important is the distance measured. Okay, so now for the next round, this is going to be a decrease round. We're going to chain 2, and we're going to only single crochet in the first wattle stitch, and that produces the first decrease. So once you've worked that single crochet as your decrease, then we are just going to work wattle stitches in the remainder of those chain 1 spaces all the way around. At the end of this round, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the chain 2 space, just like we've been doing. And then the 4 rounds following this are just going to be normal rounds. We are not going to be working in the single crochet, but only in the wattle stitches. So again, this is a decrease round. We will work this, and then followed by 4 rounds of regular, just continuing the same count without decreases. After we do that, we are going to repeat the decrease round and the 4 regular rounds after that an additional 7 times. And so for every 5 rounds, you're going to be decreasing the stitch count, the wattle stitch count, by 1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work this, and then I'll show you what I have. One recommendation I will make is to mark each decrease with a stitch marker or a piece of contrasting yarn of some sort, just to help you keep track of how many decreases plus the additional 4 rounds that you have completed. It just makes it a lot easier if you mark each of those decreases. That is, just mark, for example, the single crochet, which is right here at the beginning of this round. You can just mark that with a stitch marker. And just leave those in so that you don't have to go back and try to recount everything. This is what you should have after completing those repeat rounds with the decreases. And I'll show you what I've done. I have stitch markers for every time I decreased, and I put a stitch marker in that single crochet where I crocheted a single crochet instead of a wattle stitch, and then additional 4 rounds after that. And so I did that the first time and then repeated it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Again, followed by the 4 rounds. Now what I'm going to do is the next 10 rounds, I'm going to work just maintaining the stitch count. So what I'm going to do is just continue working in pattern stitch with the wattle stitch in those 24 wattle stitches per round. I'm going to do that for a total of 10 additional rounds. Now, at this point, if you want your sleeve to be shorter or longer, you can adjust that number easily just by working additional or fewer rounds. Keep in mind that we're going to work the last inch or so using the ribbing stitch, just like we did at the bottom of the sweater. Okay, so definitely leave this amount to be worked on the sleeve when we finish. After completing those additional 10 rounds, we're ready for the ribbing. So let's go ahead and chain 2, 1, 2, and we are going to skip the double crochet, and we're going to work a double crochet in the chain 1 space and a double crochet in the single crochet, and we're going to do that all the way around. So we're going to only end up with 2 double crochets per wattle stitch. So that would make a total of 48 double crochets. Now, after we do a round or 2 of this, and if you decide that you want the ribbing to be slightly tighter, all you need to do is change down 1 hook size. I'm using a size G. You can just go down to a size F or 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, and that will tighten it up just a bit. So go ahead and continue working the double crochets around. After working these all the way around, go ahead and join with a slip stitch to that first stitch of the round. And for the record, the chain 2 does not count as a stitch. So now we're going to chain 2, and this is the way you are going to work the next 4 rounds, which would be rounds 2 through 5. We're going to work a front post double crochet followed by a back post double crochet, and just work that all the way around. Front post and then back post. So go ahead and work that all the way around and join just like we did at the top of that first double crochet, and at the end of round number 5, go ahead and fasten off and hide the loose strands. Now I've completed my sweater with the arms and everything. I'll put a better picture of this in for you right here. And I have one more thing I'm opting to do. You can also create or crochet an optional ribbed collar around the top.
I honestly believe this sweater stands alone fine without doing this, but I think it could also add some continuity by adding a ribbed edging that's going to match the bottom of the sweater and the arms. Again, this is optional, and if you wanted to add this to the summer version of the sweater, that would be the sweater without the long sleeves, you can certainly do that. And also concerning that, feel free to experiment with other more summer friendly fibers if you opt for the summer version. Well, let's go ahead. I'm going to turn this to the back. Now we're going to start the ribbed collar trim, and I'm simply going to do this by joining in the back of the collar. Make sure you do that. And I'm going to join the original starting chain just like this. I'm going to work my little slip knot and join with that chain 2. And we're going to do this by beginning by working front and back post stitches around the foundational row of double crochet. So we're going to start with a front post double crochet and then a back post, so we can begin the ribbing right off. Front post and then back post, and we're just simply going to work this all the way around the collar. Front post and back post, just like so. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first stitch of the round right here, and then we're going to chain 2 without turning, and we're just going to again work round 2 through 5 with working front post double crochets, back post double crochet, front post, back post, just the way we did for the ribbing along the end of the sleeves and at the bottom of the sweater. So go ahead and complete those 5 rounds and then fasten off, and at the end of that, go ahead and hide all of your loose ends using the yarn needle, making sure that you clip those ends close once you've hidden them very carefully into your work. Well, I hope you enjoyed making my Celtic braided sweater today. If you did, as always, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to comment below. God bless. Bye-bye.